Take a seat to use the class agenda. Okay. Councillor Lee's at the right. Okay, thank you. So we're on to item 14 on the agenda, which is customer charter and customer contact policy.
So this report presents a fresh customer contact policy and customer charter for consideration by council this afternoon. The customer charter provided at Appendix 1 replaces the current published charter, which dates from 2009, and seeks to re-establish the set of commitments and standards and how council services will respond to and manage their customer inquiries aligned with the council's values. The report also presents the refreshed customer contact policy, which replaces the unacceptable behaviour policy approved in 2015. The policy sets out the council's expectations on contact from our customers and also, where necessary, the measures we will take to protect staff where contact falls below these standards. Both the Charter and customer contact policy play an important role in both supporting the council's vision, values, and also striving to provide high standards of customer service. Both the Charter and policy will be supported by a communications campaign and a development and training plan for employees. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, Shireen, are there any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Actually, I guess I had hoped to speak to you yesterday, it's just the that we weren't able to do it. And I know I've kind of raised this previously in tripartite about kind of the councillors' kind of position and all this sort of thing. In 218, there's a kind of paragraph, a section there about dealings with the councillors. Now, I've been previously told that councillors didn't come under this policy because we're not employees. And we obviously have a different kind of code, etc. And I know Councillor Earls put in an amendment in relation to one point there. But for me, having councillors and dealing with councillors there as part of that policy, it does infer that councillors are kind of considered under that policy, which I do have a bit of an issue with, and I'm just wondering why that's been put in there.
Okay, thank you for your question, Councillor Forson. So there's two papers. One is a charter which sets out commitments and standards on how we will provide customer service, and there is a policy for employees. So there are two separate documents. Elected members or councillors are included in the charter, and we've included them because they're in the existing policy. So to remove elected members from that would have been changing really the charter materially. So elected members are included in the charter that we've consulted on, as is reflected in the current charter. The policy is a policy for employees, so it doesn't make reference to elected members.
I suppose my issue about that is then if a member of staff didn't follow the policy of the charter, there's steps that could get taken in relation to that. If a councillor doesn't do any of these things, really the organisation say over what a councillor does and doesn't do. So I'm trying to get a question there. Do you agree with that?
So the charter sets out the commitments that we would be expecting all staff and councillors to display when they're engaging with customers. The policy would set out the expectations we would expect to see in terms of how we would deal with negative behaviours from customers and how we would support staff. So the charter is a set of commitments, the policy is a council policy.
They kind of go hand in hand though.
Still not a question.
Do they go hand in hand?
I was going to comment on the previous point, Councillor Wilson. So the point I would make is it's just a different route or mechanisms. So if you think about the charter is our public facing piece in terms of our customers, residents and so on, what we should expect to engage with the councillor at the council, be that council or officers. So that's about our commitments. It's kind of, you know, these are our commitments to our public and service users. If you're right, so the policy piece, if for an officer the conduct fell below that standard, we would have internal mechanisms to deal with that. The routes of councils it would actually manifest either potentially through a complaints process or through an investigation or standards type issue. So it would be different mechanisms, not under this policy.
Any other questions? Councillor Conley?
Thank you, Chair. Shirley, what would you say were the biggest changes between what the project is now and what was in place before?
The charter is fairly similar. It looks and feels a lot different. The previous version looked quite dated. It had dated images, photographs. So we have refreshed that. Felt like the right time to do that, and also we can refresh the communications campaign and make our staff aware and customers aware of the charter. The customer contact policy has much more information around social media being probably the biggest change between the unacceptable behaviour policy and the customer contact policy is the level of engagement we have on social media at the moment, or now, as opposed to when the original policy was developed. I think as well there's more information on how we would support staff and how we would report and manage incidents of harassment, abuse or violence towards staff. So I would say those are the main differences.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Alexander.
Thanks, Stephen. On the same point as Councillor Forson, the elected members attended a session with the Standards Commission a few weeks ago. The Standards Commission pointed out that councillors have no obligation to respond to constituent inquiries. However, I will suggest for 1 minute that we all stop doing that. I mean, we're all quite, we know that we want to respond to contacts with our constituents, and as elected members, that's how it should be. However, does this, here's the question, does this fly in the face of the Standards Commission? Because the Standards Commission are saying the very opposite to what the Charter say.
Thank you, Councillor. I think my interpretation of that, because obviously I was at that Standards Commission briefing too, was what we were talking about at the time that those comments were made were around kind of extenuating, exceptional type circumstances where maybe perhaps become a bit intractable in some of the engagements, or it was difficult to find resolution either for the person involved or to the council satisfaction. I think, as you say, in the normal course of events, of course you're responsive. You know, that's ever been the way, and that was acknowledged in that session. I don't think we're mutually exclusive at all. I think that particular part of the conversation, as I took it, was about those things that happen rarely but can actually take up a disproportionate amount of time, and we were given advice as to what was appropriate in that circumstance.
Any other questions? Councillor Wolf?
I'll take the opportunity just to refer to me to ask a question which I've always wanted to ask and never really had a clear understanding of before. What constitutes a constituent of mine? Who is a constituent? What is a constituent?
I'm not sure.
Well, the question was an example, maybe we'll try to clarify, sorry. Is somebody living in Scotland constituent or are they not? Or is it collectively, you know, constituents or?
So, you know, we would probably, or in history, we've had examples of where these sorts of questions become relevant. I think what we tend to is we would start at the ward level in terms of the interpretation of constituents. We do know that all councils are probably intimately contacted by people out with their ward area. Sometimes it can be on a specific issue basis. I think there are also issues, particularly for spokespeople in their roles where they might be contacted on a thematic basis. So there's a bit of, looking issue by issue, but I would say that the starting point for me would be looking at constituent definition at water level. That's the usual guide we give when we look to deal with those sorts of issues in the past.
So the goods that comes relevant in the charter, is that we do to the Clackmannanshire right or making it simple for constituents to contact them. And it shouldn't put almost a good constituent, and equally important constituent themselves to understand whether or not you're their councillor or they are your constituent, and whether or not you need a response or need that kind of approach that's outlined in the charter. Because that causes some confusion, I must admit. You tend to kind of respond to everybody, but you tend to at the start I tend to kind of provide more services to people that are involved. But I'm not really clear, so does this charter make it any clearer for us, or does it make it clearer for constituents? Because perhaps there needs to be something in there around what a constituent is and who your councillor is. And sorry, my last point. The first point on the dealings with councillors paragraph says the first point of contact should be council services. Why?
So there's a mixture of questions there, councillor. So I'm not picking and choosing, I'm trying to remember which one you've asked. Just in terms of kind of your reflection, and then I think your first question about the definition of constituent, there is something about the two hats that councillors wear in terms of your ward level responsibilities and that role and council. So that's why I wouldn't give a definitive, it's definitely the one thing or the other, because depending on the individual circumstance of whatever the issue you've been contacted about, it might be that you're wearing the other hat, if that makes sense. So if you're contacted by somebody out with your ward, it may be that it's relevant because for you to still consider it as a member of council that may be involved in decision making on that or otherwise. So it just depends on the issue. I'm just trying to remember some of your other questions, councillor, can you remind me? I know there was definitely one for Sheree in there.
That's what we're requiring for the charter to have a description of that.
The first point of contacting, I would suggest we deal with through a different avenue, which would be what we do there, how to contact your council piece, the information we put out on that. I'm quite happy for us to have a look at that again and make sure that we're trying to reflect some of that subtlety there about the role that councillors play, sometimes as ward councillors, sometimes as council or body corporate, if that makes sense. Actually, there was the question for you at the end as well. Can you answer? First point of contact here.
Can you ask the question again?
Hi, sorry, the first point of contact should be council services. The question is fine. Why should it be first point of contact council services? Why can't it or should it not be first point of contact councillors?
That's a good point, and I guess it depends on what the inquiry is. I think what normally we would do is, is record what that kind of inquiry is at the first stage, and then provide advice to customers on how best to contact services. And there is also a lot of information that we provide elsewhere, so on the website, for example, on how best to contact services, and depending on what your inquiry is.
So that means we want to go almost like a hierarchy. So examples like a hierarchy, that's using certain things that they're able to contact services in terms of service delivery, I would assume, and for kind of less service specific issues such as like a decision making or governance, but we cross all those things, and that's and the only reason I'm asking the question because I've had that put to me quite often in the past from officers who said, why do they keep going here? You come in us and save you the bother. Can I do with which I switch to the store? Well, I'll save you the bother if they come me first. But I've always kind of been confused around that, so that's even I'm asking the question. I'm not quite interested, but I'll just say what this and whether or not you have any views on that, you share it with us.
For me, I think that goes to the heart of the distinction between officer member roles and the responsibility of officers with regards to operation and delivery. So in terms of that point of contact, we'd expect the first point of contact if there's a significant operational issue, be it a complaint or, people want advice on something or how to access something. If those sorts of inquiries will be directed through individual councillors, there's issues of potentially lack of consistency, maybe lack of knowledge. We don't expect you as councillors to know what the operational policies the council has and so on. So you'd want to make sure that that was dealt with consistently. I think that was the main thing that was come to mind.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Councillor?
So kind of follows on from what Vicky was saying. So when I was speaking to constituents and we've got issues like talking about like street lighting, I will say use the report function, because personally that's what I use when they ask me. I would do it reported rather than using my council inquiry, because it goes direct to the team. However, that's the function that I get most complaints about, is that people are using it and they don't hear back from it. And I've tried to find out, what are the standards around that and how the response should work. But that is, so I just kind of wondered, in relation to the charter, how does that kind of work with the reported function?
I think the purpose of the charter is to really re-establish that principle of customer first and customer service, and really allow us to raise the awareness of the importance of dealing with customer inquiries as best we possibly can at the highest possible standards we possibly can. I can't really comment on the operational example that you've given, but the purpose of the charter is to increase that level of customer service across all services in the council.
What I would say, Councillor Law, is if you come across issues like that where you see the pattern, or even if it's isolated examples, you would be through the relevant director or myself for us to investigate that and give you the information that you needed.
Any other questions, Councillor? Sorry.
Just a quick follow up on Councillor Law's point. When drawing up the charter, did you look at the data about the reactiveness of the reported system? Did that come into your area of concern?
No, we didn't look at data specifically, but we engaged with all customer-facing services. So we've got a lot of feedback from staff and also from customers. Again, the charter is a set of standards and a set of commitment that we're looking to re-establish to provide a high level of customer service across the council. So again, it wasn't a lot of detail, but we did engage with all services and factored feedback into the charter.
Do you think it would be worthwhile looking at that data then in order for your charter to have more accuracy and meaning?
I would be expecting that to be taken through business planning processes. That's some of the data really that should be getting reviewed and managed and scrutinised through that process.
Okay, Councillor Paulson.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I am conscious that we've put a lot of time on that, a little bit about councillors, but I think that obviously refers to a lot of us. I'm quite just keen to get clarity. That first statement, and like you're dealing with councillors saying your first point of contact should be the council. Would it not be better to have circumstances or something a little bit better in there, and maybe I'm not going to hold this paper up for that, but to actually kind of say when you should contact the council and the council services or the councillor, because as Councillor Hogan said, if it's about decision making, then they should come to their councillors. If it's about policy, they should come to their councillors. I mean, I've had constituents contact me who have said, "Oh, the officer told me to contact you because you took the decision." So it's just, for me, it's just quite misleading. Just having that as the first kind of question, and I'm just wondering whether that could deal with a little bit better.
I think, Councillor Wilson, we can deal with that through the other route that I mentioned before. I think we need to look at how we publicise that around. So we've got all the contact details of councillors that are publicised and so on. Looking, I think we could do some narrative around that makes that was the bit I was alluding to before. I think we can have a look at that.
Okay, thank you. If there's no more questions, thanks very much. Councillor Wilson, could you remove this paper?
Yeah, I will move the paper because I think overall it is a good paper and we need to remember it is about customer contact with officers. I would be happier if that paragraph had been in there about councillors to prepare. It's all very one-sided in my view when it comes to kind of how councillors are kind of treated in relation to the organisation. However, the policy itself I think is good. I think it outlines exactly what members of the public can expect when they contact the council, and I think it also outlines how council officers can expect to deal with people, and should there be unacceptable contacts, how they can then deal with that. We've all had examples when there have been real kind of complaints coming forward, and if there's an agreed policy, you can refer members of the public to that policy, etc. when they come in there. That side of it's fine for me. Like I say, I do have concerns about the councillor side of things. Maybe something that we maybe want to collectively look at and bring back, but I wouldn't want to hold it up for that at the moment. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I'm happy to formally second, and indeed, once we've maybe resolved issues like the petitions committee and vote it, maybe we could enhance the both policy and the charter at some future date. Put something in place, so I'm happy to support policy and the charter as it stands.
Thank you. We've got an amendment to submit to Councillor Earl. Councillor is going to move.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's quite simple. On page 218, it's a 218. The third bullet point says that respond to phone calls, emails, letters and requests in person, promptly and efficiently. However, as it touched on earlier on, the Council Code of Conduct in the paragraph 6.2 says a note there may be circumstances in which it is best not to respond to a constituent, and I am not obliged by the code to respond to every contact. So what I've suggested in my amendment is simply to insert the two little words where appropriate. So that it would be respond to blah blah blah, the person prompted and efficiently where appropriate. And that would then agree with the policy that the people are written. I actually think it's a good people. It's just that little bit there that seems to fly in the face because it's so just to carry that little bit up there.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a second for the amendment? Councillor Shore. Sorry? You give notes for the amendment. Do we have a second for this amendment? Councillor.
Yeah, that was it. Councillor said it's a very small adjustment to what's already in the policy, but it's an important one that it does match up against the documents.
Thank you. Councillor, you want to second amendment?
Second amendment, that's amend the report to say in the section dealing with council, just take a look at the say. Is it change the first
Can
paragraph?
you speak on
That we amend the first paragraph in the section dealing with councils to include the word normally after the word contact and before the word should. After the word should. Or before it, whatever way you want to do it. I think it would take on board the speak to them as well. I think it would take on board the concerns that a lot around that this in some way ties in the fact that constituents have been told you must look at services first. If we put the word normally, what it means is the first bit of contact should normally be in council services, or you want these issues in local council. I'd be more comfortable with that. I'm pretty sure the language as well, that seems to be that's okay.
Okay, our members of what our second amendment is and clear for it is in said. Do that second amendment? Councillor, Mr. Speaker. Okay.
Councillor, I just want to just on this, so your proposed amendment that first sentence would say your first point of contact should normally be with council services. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Does anybody wish to debate the second amendment proposed by Councillor Bowman? No. So we put it straight to the vote. Those in favour of that second amendment, could you please show? Thank you. That's unanimous. Sorry, Councillor Rennie, I think it's Councillor Rennie, I wasn't aware if you voted this.
You're on. Just put your arms up or arms down.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm finding it really difficult here.
Councillor Rennie's vote's already recorded.
Yeah.
Just sign the change to the
Councillor Rennie, can you hear me okay?
I can sort of hear you, I can
Could be the first no, I've got that. I'm trying to, so, can you hear me okay now?
sort of very much like on and off, like bits and pieces. Try and see what I can hear.
So Councillor Holden's amendment in relation to page 218 of the charter is that your first point of contact should normally be with council services. So he's proposing to amend the first sentence of the dealings with councillors, and it's a case of whether you're happy to accept that amendment or whether you disagree with it.
Yeah, I'm happy to accept that amendment, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we've got unanimous support for the second amendment, so Councillor Bowman. Remember back to the first amendment from Councillor Bell. Does anybody wish to debate the amendment? On the basis we put it straight to the vote, we're happy to accept the amendment. Those in favour, please show. That's carried unanimously as well. So we'd like to be in favour again, which is now itself open for debate. Does anybody wish to debate the favour? Councillor Bowman. Look at what the third amendment.
I was kind of trying to get that quickly, but anyway, no, just I think the reason I put the amendment box is because I was listening to what people were saying, and we didn't want to delay the paper because I think it should be acknowledged that progress because the paper, this newspaper, and people comfortable with the charter, comfortable with politics. I think that's going to reflect in the kind of lack of debate around the amendments. A couple of small minor issues. I would kind of accept the point that perhaps councillors with some things feel a bit hard done. Because we always see these things after the fact, and the first is they feel really fully involved in the production of that, sometimes. And I think this is an example. People will see that. And I can guarantee at some point somebody will produce it to me and then say, you're meant to do this. And so it's important that we also reflect space that we're comfortable with it. Still not quite sure that for the benefit of the members, I've not been quite clear on that issue of the constituents. I really haven't, genuinely haven't. But I tend to do it works for me as a pick and choose. So if I didn't have to look the other person, and I don't my yes, I'm sorry, I have to pick one person. And if I'm in my I want to help them, I didn't want to help them, I just vote this. So that's what comes in. But that's what works for me.
Front page of the just changed. Available against the debate in the original paper. Well, Chris Boston not watching itself. Okay, so what was asked to do is no challenge or comment the contents of the customer contact policy and customer charter, which was done. And they've been asked to approve both the customer charter appendix 1 and the customer contact policy appendix 2, including the 2 amendments of Mr. Cruz. You happy to approve that?
Yeah,
Thank you. Item 15 is local development plan and our town centre master plan update report and MCs. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, councillors. This report provides members with an update on the start of a new local development plan process and the forthcoming preparation of a master plan for Allentown Centre. Recent changes to planning legislation have resulted in significant reform of the planning system in Scotland, including a major review of national planning policy through National Planning Framework 4. the requirement to prepare a regional spatial strategy and the opportunity for communities to prepare space plans. The process of preparing local development plans has also changed, and the documents themselves are expected to be more place-based, people-centred and delivery focused. The Scottish Government expects local authorities to prepare new style LDPs within 5 years of the new regulations and guidance being issued. So that is July 2028. Sounds far away, but we can probably not. A development plan scheme setting out a timetable for preparing a new managed local development plan under the new system has been published for consultation, and a final version of this is presented to members for approval today as Appendix 1. It is noted in the report that a review of resources will be required, as currently there is only one dedicated planning policy officer. The report also provides members with background on the preparation of a master plan for our Town Centre. It's a key location for economic, cultural and social activity, but is facing a number of opportunities and challenges. It's considered that a master plan will help direct and manage this change. A master plan process which adopts a place principle approach will enable us to establish a clear vision for the town centre in partnership with the community, businesses and other partners such as the third sector and Southern University. The master plan will identify priorities for action and will help to ensure that decisions and actions are coordinated, that major investments deliver multiple benefits and that we're in a good position to take advantage of future funding opportunities. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks. Anyone do you have any questions? Councillor Coyle?
Thanks, Emma, just clarification, I'm not 100% sure. Page 241 mentions all tenure housing land requirements, that just mean all houses. 3.7, no, bullet point. 1241, third bullet.
Yeah, minimum all tenure housing land requirements, the minimum all tenure housing land requirements.
Just wondering what the all tenure housing land requirement was.
So that just simply means it's for all types of housing. So it's for private ownership, for social rented, all things.
And if I might have got the room, on the next page, 242.3.11, town centre first principle. I probably missed this somewhere. What is the town centre first principle?
It simply means that for large footfall generating uses, such as your big retail stores, things like that it's advised to direct those individuals first where possible, where there's land available for that.
Thank you. May I carry on? Thanks very much. Right, same page, 3.16. A DPS has been prepared, etc. Just so that I understand the scale of the consultation, who were you consulting with? I mean, there's quite a small number of responses. What was the background for that?
I think it just went on our citizen space and it was publicised on social media, so it was quite widely advertised. Typically with these things, we tend not to get a huge response, but nevertheless, we did try. We did try and publicise it as well. Sometimes people maybe aren't clear what local development plan is, and it's something that we struggle to make that appeal to everybody and get interest. But we have tried, and we will continue to do that during the process.
Yeah, that suggests perhaps that the way it's presented wasn't clear. Perhaps do you think it would be better to go straight to the community councils and ask them to take a reading?
Potentially, yes. I think maybe we could have done a bit more. We could have probably just went further in the processing space, but we could have gone with all community councils, yes. But we do fully intend to engage with the community councils throughout the coming process. This was really just a kind of introduction. This is how we're going to do it. This is when we're going to do it. But when we're actually doing it, we'll definitely involve community councils a lot more.
Councillor
Yeah, the same paragraph 2.17 talks about, well, 2.16 and 2.7. We've got 12 responses, one of which was invalid. 6 indicate they're generally satisfied with the development plan scheme and wish to be involved in the LDP process in the future. Some also gave updated contact details, which is fine. 5 responses suggested issues which the LDP review should include. What are they?
don't have that in front of me just now, apologies, I can certainly get that to you, no problem.
Any other questions? No, okay, thank you. Councillor Lott, move it.
Sorry, I was just unlocking my phone, it wasn't that, I forgot my name again. But just to say Dennis's point, I'm pretty sure that the community council's got it, because I'm sure community therapeutic was not in the inside community council, just that it's still name. I'm positive I was copied in an email that they had, because I see the diagram that was in one of these, that I got that in an email, so I'm pretty sure some of them were consulted. Anyway. I welcome this update on the local development plan and our town centre master plan. I'm sure someone gets bugged that asks or every meeting, what about the local development plan? So it's really good to see a wee update coming through. I believe that we're all keen to see this work progress and how this will tie in with our priorities as a council. I'm really keen to see how we can use the local development plan for our path to net zero and increase biodiversity. This is especially important as with the introduction of NPF4. I'll say that confused. That states all development will contribute to the enhancement of biodiversity, including, where relevant, restoring degraded habitats. So I think that's a really important change that's come along there. I also think that everyone here is also welcome to work on the Alba Town Centre Master Plan. Again, this massively ties in with our priorities and strategies as a council, and it's also important to highlight the need for local communities to get involved with this development and ensuring that we have a plan that will work for the local community now and in the future.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McTaggart, to second.
Just to formally second that, convener, thank you.
Thank you. So the paper is now open for debate. Interest debate, Councillor Lott.
Thanks for doing all this. The second remarks to the Town Centre Master Plan. I didn't read it and I can't recall where it is exactly now, but I was just thinking, it's just this kind of paradox that we're talking about here. Emma introduces the report and talks about who we're going to engage with, but we're one of the people we're going to engage with, which is a good thing. In terms of our Town Centre Master Plan. Everybody's looking at things that we have that wrong, but that's what I thought I read in there in terms of consultees, is that correct? I think it was included in that, yeah. So which is a good thing, because it avoids a situation, I think, which we found ourselves in, but it's the home and government activity, I promise I won't, because it's bad enough going through reliving it. But hopefully, this approach will avoid us taking decisions on a day-by-day basis, and a week-by-week basis, and everything changes in our town centre and nobody's happy. Nobody's happy with the outcome. But the public one thing, they were quite robust, they want narrow pavements, and then something, the shop owners say that they want a QB system, then something more parking, other people don't want parking. Hopefully this will try and at least address that. I'm not sure it's going to take judgment Solomon to try and arrive at conclusions to what's everybody and it's done this depending on what's best for our town centre. Because we live here and that's part of our life, it means a lot to us and all what our opinions and what would be better. But what we've got is a process. And what we've got is a clear indication to our members that we're going to take into account in that process, which is more than what we had before. That I can recall, because I can never really recall being asked these questions. So, as I said, we're stripping comments to that rather than development plan, something which I have no interest in. Unfortunately, I haven't seen that as appropriate, but nevertheless, I'm interested in our Town Centre Master Plan. And I'm grateful for the inclusion of elected members in there, and as I say, other shops as well, in terms of trying to draw all these opinions and different opinions together for one document, trying to something that everybody's going to be happy with, or at least somebody's going to be happy with. It will be a challenge. I look forward to it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Debate, Councillor Forson.
Yeah, I welcome this. To set out the process, it's not actually kind of asking for any real decisions there. However, both the Alba Town Centre Master Plan and the Local Development Plan are really important. They're key documents for us, particularly around about the Local Development Plan, because it sets out what land we are saying is up for development. It will have implications on planning applications, etc. moving forward. If an area is zoned as a green belt zone, then that should be pretty standard, that that's not where we're going to be building new houses or businesses, etc. In areas of brownfield, there's a little bit more kind of leeway there. I think it's also really important to be looking to the future in this. Some things that we don't necessarily set out in the local development plan what are stories for Clackmannanshire, and I think that's really key, particularly if we're looking at things like the investment strategy moving forward. What areas are we zoning for business? What are the policies that we can put in around about that to support businesses? What areas are we looking for housing? Are we going to meet our affordable housing targets? Are we going to meet the demand for housing in the local area? All of these things all have to come together. And crucially for me, it's also somewhere that we can set out, as Fiona said, our ambitions for net zero. What is it that we're going to be requiring developers to do if they come forward with plans for their local area within any of these zones? So it's really an important document, and I think there's an opportunity for councillors to engage fully in this. I remember from the last time around there was an awful lot of kind of workshops and engagement with councillors in the local community that resulted in a great big, I don't know, 100-page document that kind of was probably never looked at again by any of us. But it's such an important kind of process to go through, and hopefully we'll get one that we can all sign up to, that can drive the direction of Clackmannanshire for the future. And we've all had occasions where in our local area there's been complaints about house building because of other infrastructure issues, because of flooding, because of, kind of, who knows, do we need to take a wider view? Do we need to say, well, there's only going to be one area that will be developed in? These are the sorts of questions that we're probably starting to think about, and there probably will be a bit of policy decisions within that for us moving forward. So good to see this started, and good luck to everyone on the team, because as you said, 5 years seems like a long time away, but actually when we start to go through all the processes for this, it's not. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else contribute to the debate? Councillor Lodge, you opportunity to start.
I was just going to add that we have asked for a kind of councillor working group to make sure that councillors are engaged in the process, and we can put all the things that we feel that it's important for the community across.
Okay, thank you. So what the documents asked us to do is to note the reformat and process of the development plan. Notice the going changes to the development plan system associated with some areas that need to be addressed. To note the reasons for developing a town centre master plan for the two things we've been asked to approve is the development plan scheme consulted on in July, August of this year for publication, and agreed the master plan will be developed, led by the council, will be prepared in accordance with Scottish Futures Trust Space Guide process for improved place-based decision making. We have to approve the paper.
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 16 is the Scottish Housing Regulator annual assurance statement, and Molly's going to take us through the papers.
Thanks, Convener. Afternoon, councillors. Unfortunately, I've been left holding this one with Andy still out dealing for tenants presently. So the paper today is presenting a key part of our regulatory framework for housing services, which is the annual assurance statement, which has to be submitted to the regulator by the 31st of October each year. It aligns with the charter which was approved earlier on in the year, which is submitted to the regulator on the 31st of May each year. As the paper notes, the housing regulator is going through a process to review regulatory arrangements. Consultation has been underway this year, so it could be that this might change in future in terms of the provision and the submission of these reports. Clearly, the report lays out some areas of non-compliance where we are obviously engaging with the regulator. So it references in terms of electrical compliance, and just to update members, we have been working through a process on that, so we've now only got 500 electrical certifications to go on that basis. In terms of the fire alarms, the interlinked fire alarms, which is noted in the paper in terms of asking members to approve our assurance around making sure that each household has been fitted correctly with the approved interlinked fire alarms. As at yesterday's date, 324 houses have been checked, and I'm happy to confirm to members that each house that has been checked so far has been fully compliant with that process. Clearly, the paper talks about and discusses about our arrangements in terms of tent participation. Clearly, arrangements have been underway in relation to moving forward in terms of housing redesign, and I can gladly confirm to members that this week a TP officer was interviewed and accepted the post, and he is now going through pre-employment checks to start with us. Clearly, the recommendations are laid out in the report for members to approve. Obviously, 2.7, that is a typo. We're that focused on our money, that we've got arrears in our head. I should say areas of non-compliance. Apologies. And I'd just like to just reference, as Lee has informed the convener, engagements with the Housing Regulator in relation to RAC. The regulator is expecting the council to receive a paper at next month's council meeting in relation to progress in terms of RAC, where we will then update the regulator in terms of that progress. Happy to take any further questions on the paper.
Okay, thanks for that, Mike. Do we have any questions? Councillor Quinn.
Morning. Just a quickie on the defaults that were made. Apart from COVID, were there any other serious faults found in the system which have had to be rectified and has the rectification been done? No, the reason that you defaulted on, if it wasn't down to COVID, was it down to something else? That should be talked about.
You mean in reference to the electrical safety compliance?
Well, in this report, there are a number of failures recognised.
Sorry, in the report, starting on page 271, the assurance statement, there are a number of items where you're reporting non-compliance. Now, some of those will be laid at the door of code. Those that are not, did they reveal any major failings in the system?
It's obviously it's a good question in terms of looking at it from that perspective. Clearly, we have highlighted in the report the electrical safety certification was clearly an area which was affected by COVID, because clearly at the time of the COVID restrictions, it was the focus of the council was obviously life and limb protection and support services. So clearly that programme was pulled at that stage. We've been working to address that. There's obviously other areas where perhaps in terms of referencing in terms of homelessness legislation, clearly the council was updated in terms of June, in terms of what we're progressing in terms of avoid turnaround time to try and address those aspects. Some of that's to do with COVID, some of it's to do with wider aspects in terms of the supply chain, in terms of access, in terms of dealing with voids. So some areas down to COVID, but some areas down to ourselves in terms of us trying to pull together. So obviously the TP officer, clearly that had to wait in terms of what was progressing through the redesign of the service. It's obviously been out to recruitment twice, and obviously successfully recruited this week.
Thank
you. Okay, Councillor.
That's the point, perhaps. I was going to ask a similar question, but I'm going to be direct, I suppose. Answer. So it's interesting. I'm aware that you've put the back on these issues before, but you've got the issue there about tenants and resident safety. There's a clear explanation as to why there's been non-compliance. However, when you contrast that with antisocial behaviour and homelessness, it tells you what you're going to do, but it doesn't actually explain why. Right? I understand the point of view around COVID, supply chain pressures, etc., which presumably the homelessness issue comes out of the houses very good. Maybe for Neil, one and start, first of all, can ask, there's no council-wide strategy or housing policy in this government, and that's statement over because that's simple as a statement of fact. Why don't we have a policy in there? On strategy.
Yeah, and it's a good point, because clearly when Tony presented this paper last year, that was referenced within the documentation last year, asking for council to take forward that if we know within the relevant business plan. So I think what we've done differently this year is clearly we've moved that to the front in terms of the approval, in terms of the recommendations. So that's noted, the council to formally approve that recommendation to bring it front and centre. But yes, I agree that that has been an area it's been part of the 2004 legislation that was all councils were had the requirement to have an area-wide ASB strategy. Clearly, as I understand it, the council has not had one since 2004. So clearly that is an area which needs to be progressed. And the following from that is clearly the council's own housing ASB policy would follow on from that.
So just for clarity's sake, so we're all accepting we have to do something about it. why have we not had an antisocial behaviour strategy since 2004?
Clearly some of that predates when arrival here, but as understand, obviously, as you're aware, Councillor Oldham, there was previously, there was ASB coordinators who were funded directly by the Scottish Government, so clearly that's been a deficiency in the arrangements previously, which has not made sure that's come through to the fore, but clearly now with the reference in this report that's been highlighted by yourself and by other members, and obviously the documentation that was circulated to members previously, when you asked the question to myself directly, obviously the council leader and the spokesperson had engagements with the police service recently on this matter as well. It's clear that the report and the strategy has to be signed off jointly by the council and police service, so obviously it requires partner engagement.
But it doesn't require partners, but I take your point, so just for clarity, so just saying that the strategy isn't, the policy is not in place because we don't have a strategy. And obviously, no matter what you do, you align the policy, the strategy isn't there, it's kind of a policy. But the point I'm making is, so that's, you can confirm that that's what you're saying to the moment, so I think that's what you're saying. But the second point again is it not the case, really though, that the reason why we went 19 years with an antisocial strategy, yes, you can say it was a lack of engagement with partners because it's a corporate responsibility, it's not just one that pays the council, it's a financial wider. We've not had to start with it. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, so the void safe is stated on it, it's just not been done.
Something from the always needs to be stated, so we all get it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clinton.
Thank you. Quick question then. Is there any consequences for non-compliance for any of these? What's likely to happen as a result of this and what could potentially happen? Thanks.
Yes, it's a good point. Clearly, the Scottish Housing Regulator, and this is why they've been engaging this year in terms of their ongoing engagement with the sector. They have a more formal engagement with the RSL sector. Clearly, the RSL sector have to provide a lot more information to the regulator than the councils do because councils have their own governance in place in terms of best value, and we have our own external auditors who carry out best value reviews, etc. However, in terms of the compliance question, clearly the regulator has been involved with other housing associations, those that have notices in terms of whether they're financially viable, etc. And then those associations are able to take forward the recommendations of the regulator appointment, such as managers, etc. In terms of councils, in terms of non-compliance, clearly this is about self-assessment. Clearly the audit model for Scotland moved to a self-assessment model a number of years ago, which was driven by the regulatory bodies. So clearly the regulator is looking for councils to determine and be satisfied with the assurance arrangements we made in this paper. And that's why the paper suggests, based on suggestions from some of our corporate colleagues, that potentially this paper, if arrangements are the same next year, that this would come to Audit and Scrutiny Committee for a much more in-depth discussion than perhaps we can have today, and then before going formally to council. If the regulator isn't satisfied by their arrangements, what's likely to happen is there would be engagement via the chief executive or via the council to say, we're not sure that you've got the appropriate arrangements, say for example, in terms of fire safety, etc. We've not yet been satisfied in terms of how you're dealing with that issue. You're probably right in the first instance letter, in which case, if that was received, we would have to collectively come together and agree how we then respond to that.
Well, thanks very much. So essentially, as long as they're happy with dealing with things, then they keep everything. But if they weren't happy, they would start poking around and asking more questions for others. Okay.
Yeah, there is I think that it's still exists. I'm not going to say it's sure. There is still the shared risk assessment that the regulatory bodies facilitate. So it would feature within the shared risk assessment and share that risk with regulatory bodies as well, if they want to start. So,
thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor
Just in regards to Westport, I know obviously the demolition's been done, and I do see cars outside, obviously, and it looks like there could be work starting on the very soon. Do you have a date for that for it to start the actual new build?
Yes, well, it's effectively underway. As you've seen, the demolitions occurred they're doing prep work in terms of the ground. What's been on order now is the leader released the order, the actual kit for the actual properties has been ordered from the suppliers. So clearly that's going through the production phase. When that arrives, obviously, you'll see a lot more activity then on site.
Thank you, Councillor Martin.
I just wondered why this commission didn't come with the four-point plan you have for state the department, you know, basically taking it to bits and giving it a name.
Just a bit of water there before I answer. In terms of the Vanguard process, clearly that was integral in terms of our service improvement. That was the consultants in terms of looking at the service aspect was about driving performance, about driving in terms of how staff respond in terms of our customer engagement, looking at how quickly we managed to progress voice through the system, how quickly and how we're supported in terms of that arrears process. It didn't look, it wasn't a self-assessment, shall we say, in terms of our legislative statutory powers, although that was crucial in terms of some of those processes that we looked at, but in terms of ASB, that's really for us to take forward rather than that next second.
Thanks.
Any other councillor?
Just ask that question, Murray, but it's kind of fallen to the point was made by Councillor Quinn. I think he was asking the question about non-compliance, and I think that's what he's going to demand about sanctions imposed by the regulator for non-compliance. But there's another side to that, of course, because in the paper there, 266 and set paragraph talks about breach of homeless persons and suitable accommodation order due to the use of temporary accommodation with the local authority for more than 7 days. Now, in terms of impact, the impact on that's massive. I'm not sure if the elected members are aware of that. I'm not talking about impact in terms of the regulator or the sanction, like the sanction. Can you explain to us what the impact of that particular non-compliance has been in terms of the homeless applicants?
Yeah, and we'll reference just briefly, it's probably a good idea in terms of what you referenced earlier about making sure we give the wider explanation in this table as well to some of these ones. In terms of the unsuitable accommodation order, in terms of that 7 days, that actually follows you through your journey. So if an individual reports here, in terms of Clackmannanshire Council, the 7-day period, if we have to place them out of the area, effectively stays with them if they then have to report to another local authority. So the 7 days is like follows you around once you've actually presented for homelessness. In terms of just now, we currently have 14 out of area placements, mostly in the Stirling area. There was discussion at the time when this instrument was coming in terms of the requirements in terms of local authorities to look at their duties in terms of that local authority specific duty. I think we've discussed this before. Clearly there's other aspects in terms of that legislation in terms of whether the accommodation meets their needs in terms of schooling, social connections and or employability. However, we weren't able to convince the civil servants at that time that those duties were perhaps more better to look at from an individual point of view than the actual local authority specific aspect. Clearly, in terms of some local authority areas, they've got a wide area, wide geographic area. I mean, Highland Council's got the landmass of Belgium. We're talking about potentially sending somebody across the us to Stirling. Now, I know that for the individual, that doesn't necessarily matter. And that's where I think the other parts of the legislation are particularly crucial about the access to employment, access to support networks, etc. So, for exactly last week, in dealing with the situation we had in Tillicooty, there was at least one tenant who'd actually referenced that staying elsewhere would be beneficial for him based on his employment. And I think it was somewhere else in Scotland rather than locally. So for us, in terms of, it is obviously crucial because we're obviously measured and we're on the report on this in terms of the area. But for us, it's really about making sure, first and foremost, we're trying to support the individuals, whether it's access to work, access to support networks, etc. But it is, as the paper in June said, clearly an area which we're trying to resolve, trying to eliminate, trying to minimise, and that's where it comes back to maximising the return of the works.
Thanks, and can I just conclude that point? Just from what we found at the start, as you spoke about the 14 placements being out with Clackmannanshire in terms of provision, most of which are in Stirling. Can you tell us how many are not in Stirling and where those are?
Any of them, if any of those booking are not in Stirling, they are likely to be in Kilcorey.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thanks for that, Molly. Councillor Taggart in the debate.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks, Molly. We can see from this report and from the issued statement that some areas are deemed as non-compliant, as we've just discussed, which is unfortunate but not unique. Across Scotland, local authorities are reporting similar and often much worse areas of non-compliance. Now, I'm not saying that that's acceptable in any way, I'm just offering this as context. Homelessness is a particular area where non-compliance is an issue. However, I attended a Croswell Housing Conveners meeting earlier this week where homelessness was a principal agenda item, and the figures quoted there were eye-watering. Non-compliance was reported across almost all local authority areas, not through choice or bad practice, but simply because the availability of accommodation can't keep up with the persistent rise in homelessness presentations. These challenges are evident across Scotland, and the relaxing of rules around unsuitable accommodation is being considered to ease the burden on local authorities. We've increased our stock through off-the-shelf purchases, and you'll recall that Council previously agreed to an additional budget spend to engage a contractor to speed up the turnaround of those and other voids to increase our availability. This is already providing benefits, and void turnaround is improving, which will have a positive impact on meeting our homeless and transfer list needs going forward. The safety of our tenants is of course crucial, and the service has given assurances that the programme of works around safety will be concluded by the end of March 2024. Tenant participation has been seriously lacking for a number of years. I've raised this regularly over recent months, and actions are now underway to ensure that we are making progress with the tenant participation strategy. The Council leader and I have met with Police Scotland to emphasise that a joint approach to tackling antisocial behaviour is crucial. It's imperative that we get a strategy and a policy in place to ensure that our tenants and residents know that we take this very seriously. As Murray mentioned, the vacant tenant participation officer post has been through 2 rounds of recruitment, and I'm pleased to inform Council that just this week an offer has been made and accepted by an applicant who is hopefully going to be in post by early November. The process is to fill a further 2 posts, a policy officer and a service planning and participation officer are underway and are currently with our HR service. Once released for recruitment, these posts will be advertised, and I hope that we can expect a speedy conclusion to those processes. But as demonstrated with the appointment of the tenant participation officer, recruitment is an issue, and that's replicated throughout the country. And while our processes can be robust, we have no control over any interest that might or might not be generated in trying to fill these posts. Despite the issues mentioned, tenant satisfaction remains very high, and the service must be commended for their efforts to retain that high level of satisfaction. Contractors are now on site to rebuild the Travellers site in Alba, and our housing team continue to liaise with those displaced as a result of this work. Finally, you'll all be aware of the recent issues around the discovery of RAC. This has impacted hugely on staff time and resource. And while it is critically important that this is dealt with in an efficient, effective and empathetic way, other work has stalled while the staff deal with this. And I personally can't praise the staff highly enough for their effort. I thank all involved for their commitment and professional manner in dealing with this matter. This has been clearly a devastating time for tenants and residents involved, and I sincerely hope we can find a timely solution to the current situation, and I absolutely empathise with the situation that the tenants and residents find themselves in. I'm happy to propose this paper, Convener. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Watt, second.
Formally second, please.
Okay, thank you. Paper's open for debate. Councillor Holton.
Thanks, Convener. Just to touch on a couple of points on, first of all, the areas of non-compliance. We've spoken about that and we've asked some questions. I I'm struggling because I can't see the rest of it. The one about, the homelessness does concern me, and I do understand the great efforts of pushing for that, turnover before the properties, that kind of stuff, so that you more temporary accommodation. I'm not aware, if members are fully aware of the implication of homelessness and some of the issues that are at play here in terms of our inability to provide temporary accommodation, inability to provide temporary accommodation, not even with inability to provide temporary accommodation out within the local authority area. There's a problem in both these areas. And just to give you a wee bit of reality check on this, my big concern is what I'm seeing, I get all these people coming in saying, well, how long does it take for me to get a house? And I say, well, don't become hours, probably 12 months. Okay. And so the option is, between now and the next 12 months, we have to talk about Kirkcaldy. And I'm no doubt trying Kirkcaldy, but the analogy we made with Belgium, the quality is already placed in Belgium because they've got as much transport for Kirkcaldy as they've got to Belgium. And maybe always say, okay, that's a neighbouring local authority, it's no far away, it is a world away. And it's a world away when it comes to support services, which a lot of people find themselves within their own situation, need access to support services, need access to friends and family, many don't have the form of transport. Kirkcaldy would result in on the dark side of the moon. And I'm sorry if that's, some people would say it is the dark side, I'm not going to say that, but, there's a real genuine concern there. So what happens is, when they find themselves faced with that option, they then say, nah, that's fine, I'll just wait. What they're doing then is they're sleeping on their mum and dad's sofa, or their friend's sofa, something, or they're sleeping through. They've received no support, and they're basically in limbo for 12 months, until such times they can get rated. So that's why, that's the context of it, that's the impact of it. We can look inward and say, what's the impact is in terms of the regulatory sanction against us. What really should be exploring is the situation where homeless people find themselves in a situation where they have nowhere at all for 12 months. Equally, they can come and say, well, no longer, we have then effectively discharged our duty, we've offered them terms of accommodation, it was recorded, they didn't want it, they refused it, therefore, it masks the real severity of the situation. And because we've fulfilled our obligations. But meanwhile, the person still finds himself in a situation where for 12 months, they don't know where they're staying, they've got no support, and I dread to think that in fact that can be some people. But lucky, of course, we can a lot of people put themselves in a situation where I'm friends and family, therefore. So that's not something we can control. In terms of that social behaviour strategy and the social behaviour policy, I can, I've got to acknowledge that I'm sitting down for a number of years when we didn't have one. I was never didn't have one. I assume that when the very first things that we had, it's surprising we still every time here, we do not have that social behaviour strategy. For one of the biggest issues to present, it's the most problems to the council over the last 20 years we never started to deal with. And I have some degree of sympathy with the argument put forward that these would be under strategy because it's not just the intention or our involved in it, the president involved in the police, there'll be a lot about it. And some other partners as well, because these things I don't think are priorities. We've had a discussion previously about the link between actual behaviour and criminality. If there's no criminality, police are interested in it, really, and that's perhaps not fair, but it's not a number one priority for them. So that would perhaps be something that we will develop the strategy. But we need to get the strategy in place, because if we didn't get the strategy in place, it's already been acknowledged by the officers themselves that we can't produce the policy. And it's really important to have a policy that deals with that social behaviour. And obviously, I'm attempting to deal with that through the next motion, we'll discuss that when we come to it, that's the reason why these things are so important. I fully acknowledge my role in that. I've missed the books on my watch as well, so I can't just condemn everybody the last 19 years. I'm doing myself in that. I've missed that on my watch as well. But at least we're going to get to the point where we've got an opportunity today to look at rectifying that. But we need to move on these things, and we need to have the resources in place. How long have we had in place the budget for the tenants, not the tenants, for the two posts that was referred by Councillor Taggart? And it's no problem, it's like we're making control of filling in these posts. Well, filling the posts is the problem until such times as you actually advertise them. And it moves through HR into the field that people can apply for them. We've not looked at that yet, so we can't blame on that. We can't blame the fact that people are applying for it because we haven't advertised them yet. Until we get to that point, until for some reason it's put this method between within HR or within housing, and if white people are confused about why it's not been brought before now, I really don't understand. I'm not going to ask too many questions about it because I feel like it's something that's a bit complicated and perhaps a bit uncomfortable for some people.
we need to move on these quicker because the impact is not having these positions in place means as a policy impact, which then subsequently has a major genuine impact on people's lives, which I've just tried to put into some description of in terms of the homelessness situation. So we need to move on. I welcome the report for what it is. It's honest because it has to be. You can't get away with being dishonest with it. And at least we're having an honest debate about it to say, okay, there are some real problems here, but it would be helpful in the future if the reports did come back in a format and say, this is non-compliance, and this is the reason why we're non-compliant, rather than just saying this is what we're going to do. We do know that it's fine, but we need to know these so we can learn from those as well. But I do understand also the knowledge that we need to come back. So I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to enter the debate? Councillor McLeod, opportunity to talk. Thank you. Just probably comment that Councillor Clough on to leave the meeting. Councillor Morgan, Councillor Morgan will be returning for the rest of this meeting. So what the paper is asking us to do is 2 years ago, note the area service already highlighted as being materially non-compliant with regulatory requirements. So note the improvement actions outlined to address areas of non-compliance in the 4 years that have been asked to approve. So that's to approve the 22-23 submission of the annual assurance statement to the Scottish Housing Regulator, approving the development of Clackmannanshire anti-social behaviour strategy and subsequent housing landlord specific policies incorporated into the police business plan, detailing responsible needs and resource requirements. I've been asked to approve that the Council's risk register is updated to note that the ASB strategy requirement remains extant, and note the mitigating actions to be completed to relevant stakeholders within the following year. Finally, to approve the approach proposed by the Housing Service ensures Scotland's fully compliant to current fire regulation and note that electrical installation condition reports, monthly updates will be provided to the etc. I'm happy to approve the paper. Thank you. So we move on now to item 17 agenda, which is the motion to Clackmannanshire Council or Councillor Holden. So Holden, I should do
I'm not moving for a motion. Council raises suspend all future streaming reductions for the 12 weeks to allow for production and installation of streaming reduction policy. Can I first of all just say that I didn't intend for this, although as a version of this motion from the council at the last meeting, but we had some difficulties with that. I think it's the best way to describe it, but we're going to if I want to explain a couple of things quickly. So there's not all original motions contained within the motions. We separate the motions out. The reason for that is quite simple and straightforward, because this motion and the next motion and the motion after are 3 separate subjects, 3 different issues. There are no links between them. There's common across them, but they are 2 very different things. And also, of course, because if you lose one motion, if on one motion, you lose that one, you lose a lot. So something's better to kind of get your eggs in one basket, split them out, and hopefully try and save as many as you can. Hopefully all of them. So I'll try and just come to this motion proposal. I brought it because of the changes to the House of Scotland Act 2014, which allows councils to undertake the process called streaming reduction. And the streaming reduction can be undertaken where serious antisocial or criminal behaviour has already been proven in court. The behaviour which led to the reduction was in or in the locality of the tenant's house, and the landlord considers that the reduction is appropriate, such as to protect neighbours and other people living or working in or near the social housing property from harm. Where a court is convicted a tenant or a subtenant for someone living with the tenant or even visiting the house or using the house for immoral or illegal purposes, or a criminal offence punishable by imprisonment committed in or in the locality of the house, and the landlord set a notice of proceedings from the tenant under section 14 with impurements of a conviction or dismissal or abandonment on appeal, the court must make an order for recovery of possession of the house without considering whether the court thinks it's reasonable to do so. I'm not enough of my opinion as to put this in legislation. It's not my job to do that, but I do think it's clear that this represents a major departure from previous practice, and one that has very serious implications for our social housing tenants and their families. It's for this reason I feel it's appropriate that councils are provided with a policy report which sets out the details of the legislation, a response to that legislation, and a clear set of procedures which set out how we'll approach streaming evictions. For the avoidance of doubt, when I say how the council will approach streamline evictions, I do not mean the process by which we secure a streamline eviction in the courts. I'm talking about processes that we undertake within the council prior to that taking place. So the things we do in order to go through the checklist and different things that we do, and then we secure a streamline, we go to a court and try and secure a streamline eviction. Now the fact is the council does not have a streamline eviction policy, but a policy on legs. I think most people would recognise that, Lex is an important policy position, but I think it's more important to have a policy on an issue such as this. Officers have, however, a lot of procedures, but there is no policy to align these procedures with. Now, a lack of policy and procedures in this area presents a risk in terms of consistency of approach, natural justice, imposition determined by chance, requirement, or impulse, as opposed to necessity, reason, or principle. Where procedures are uninformed by policy, there are no checks or balances to prevent any one individual or an organisation engaging in unethical behaviour. This is something we should always be on guard against. This not only undermines public confidence in the organisation itself, but also the political structure tasked with overseeing it. It's also important that elected members are satisfied that any form of eviction is being undertaken in a balanced, proportional and fair way, which reflects the requirements of legislation whilst taking into account the guidance which accompanies it. A streamlined eviction policy with a comprehensive list of procedures set out and approach to be taken by officers will ensure that this happens. In the absence of policy, officers have understandably adopted practices to facilitate the process, and in my opinion, the processes which have been adopted are insufficient and have not been subjected to any degree of scrutiny by the elected members. So let me provide members with some brief examples of where current practices appear to be falling short of what we could expect. Officers are confronting appropriate cases of streamlined evictions are identified following receipt of police reports and the residents' complaints. I'm aware of one instance, one case, and this is another public record for anyone who's nervous about the same in public, where a council tenant, someone with substantial criminal record, entered the home of a neighbour going less than 20 metres away in the middle of the night with the intent of committing a robbery and proceeded to assault the elderly widow. This incident, understandably, had a massive impact on that community. The person was subsequently convicted of the crime and sentence was imposed, yet he was not subject to a streamlined eviction, despite meeting all the criteria. So what message does that send to communities, and what does it say regarding the processes currently in place and the consistency of our approach? I'm also aware of a case with housing officers from the council, and I'm provided that, and I've raised this with the housing officers in the past. I'm happy to find money after the council meeting with evidence about this as well. But I'm going to say it because it's the truth. I'm also aware of a case where the housing officers from the council visited a tenant in his home and not issue a warning that he faced eviction under this legislation prior to any court appearance taking place, or indeed any conviction having been secured, but following the publication of a Facebook story. Now, officers are asked to write a formal letter setting out a reason for the visit, but they think to do so and actually left at that point. Now, this raises serious questions regarding the current procedures being adopted by the council, and more importantly, the presumption of innocence to which any accused person is entitled. Officers have stated that cases are pursued or not pursued based on individual circumstances of the case, Scottish Government guidance, and consideration of advice offered by the Council Legal Services. There is, however, no policy outlining what factors will be taken into account when the Council is considering the streamlined eviction, the process to be employed when a streamlined eviction is being pursued, and the arrangements for the recording and retention of information in each case, in order that we can provide scrutiny and can be scrutinised from an external source also. There are no defined protocols in place for communication and exchange of information with relevant agencies or services. Such protocols are necessary to ensure that appropriate levels of communication and collaboration are taking place, and that this is something which is also highlighted in the Scottish Government guidance which accompanies the legislation. Officers have produced a streamlined eviction process checklist which includes the Council's antisocial behaviour procedure, but not its policy, because of course we don't have one. And they state that only when this checklist has been completed will a housing officer engage with a senior housing officer with a view to agreeing a streamlined eviction to a proportionate response. However, the checklist is far from complete, and some of the areas where it is incomplete is that the consideration of the nature and seriousness of the offence, including any recurring nature of convictions, or the cumulative effect of several incidents or the potential seriousness of a one-off offence, evidence of what action if any of the person convicted of the offence is taken to make positive change, the criteria which is used in all cases to assess the locality test. That's left up to the council to determine that, and there's been no clear guidance as to what constitutes a local locality, whether it's the house, whether it's a mile, whether it's 10 miles, whether it's the whole of Clackmannanshire. There needs consistency on that one as well. Evidence of communication with other relevant services not to establish potential break-ins and or risks to household members. Now, each of these points here are not ones that I've just made up. These are the ones that were taken directly from legislation, directly from the guidance which accompanies legislation. And that's why I'm asking for them. And that's why I think it's important that that's presented to council. So, there are many answered questions regarding rights of tenants, subject to just human eviction. Just to give one very brief example, it's not clear what would happen if a family applied to be rehoused following this human eviction. It's been suggested that each case adopts the vote in its own merits, but that decision of intentionality would most likely be made. Intentionality, however, is dependent upon someone doing something or failing to do something that causes them to leave housing that's available to stay in. This would be impossible to prove where one party committed an offence without the knowledge of the other, who would nevertheless also lose their home. So someone in your household commits a crime which you have no control over, you have no knowledge of, you, your children, and everybody else loses their home. I'm not going to go into detail about why I think the legislation is bad, but it is bad. And I'm ashamed of the fact that Scottish Government was introduced. It is draconian beyond belief. And I have real concerns about it. I know that some professional housing sector have also expressed their confusion as to why it's not capable of Scotland has. Because it really hits your rights fundamentally, your human rights and the rights as a tenant, and your rights to a fair hearing in court. We're changing the whole process like that. So it's important that we need to explore these issues. It's part and parcel of a scrutiny role. We'll be failing our communities if we fail to do that. I'm asking council to take a responsible approach on this issue and agree we should have a policy and procedures report brought forward today which will allow elected members to scrutinise the legislation and evaluate its impact on both us as an organisation and also our communities. That will ensure that our policies and practices are in accordance with best practice and have been subjected to the proper degree of scrutiny, given the importance both to our tenants and wider communities. If we intend to utilise the legislation, let's at least do so in an informed and ethical manner. I move the motion.
Thank you. Is there another second for the motion? Councillor Quinn?
I'm happy for the second motion.
Okay, the motion is now open for debate. Any members of debate? Councillor McIntyre.
Thanks, Convener. The point around the 12 weeks, I think that's going to be a worrying aspect of the motion, and I'll explain my concerns in this way. If there's if we impose this 12 weeks suspension, and there's a case that's actually ongoing right now under this legislation, and this is obviously an anecdotal thing. This is I have no knowledge of any cases that are actually ongoing, none whatsoever. However, a scenario that I would put to you. Let's say this is a person who has harmed a child. I'm not going any further than that, but who has harmed a child. And this 12-week suspension prevents us from removing that individual when convicted for harming this child, removing them from the house and the community. So therefore that person is protected to a degree under this motion because we've got a ban on this for 12 weeks while this is ongoing. But the community and the family are not. So we're removing a protection and introducing a risk. At that, the 12 weeks thing concerns me for that type of reason. And I think it would be remiss of us, if this motion passes, I think it would be remiss of us if we didn't look into that kind of scenario. For example, say a child molester had been convicted in Aberdeen. They work there, they're there 5 days a week, they come back to Clackmannanshire Saturday, Sunday. They get to jail in Aberdeen, they're up in Aberdeen for a year in jail. They come back. Now, it didn't happen in the vicinity of the property, but it presents a risk to the community that they're being introduced back into. On the other hand, it could have been somebody who committed a crime. Again, we'll talk about Aberdeen or maybe Kirkcaldy again. Maybe that terrible place called Kirkcaldy. the committed thing that isn't necessarily going to cause any problems to anybody in the community when they come back. It was a one-off thing that is unlikely to be repeated. That might not fall under the realms of that eviction process. But I just say that there are elements of that process that just could introduce harm, and there's elements in the motion that might have the opportunity to introduce harm. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Swanson.
Thanks, convener. There are a few motions here today, and some of them actually, one of them is no issue with supporting. I do have an issue with this one, and it is related to the 12-week suspension of the streamlined eviction policy. Just really because of what Jane outlined there is a risk if we suspend this policy for 12 weeks that there could be a case where it then falls out with the year that is allowed for under the legislation, and that exposes us to risk and exposes communities to risk. I would say though, this legislation was enacted in 2019, and this council has dealt with 2 cases, or applied for 2 cases of streamlined eviction within that period. So it's not like there's lots of this coming forward, and like Councillor McTaggart, I've got no kind of information about anything that's in the system, but it could happen. And if we pass that motion as it stands today, then that 12-week period does expose us to risk. That being said, I've got no problem with the policy coming forward on this. It's quite right that we should have a policy on this. And really, until kind of Councillor Holder had raised this, I probably wasn't as up to date on this side of legislation. Legislation is passed every day by our Parliament, both of them, and it's not until you find the kind of impacts and how it relates to your organisation that you maybe actually start to think about it. So while I've got no problems at all with the policy coming forward, the 12-week period does give me concerns just in case something happens there, and I don't know, I'd probably not be able to forgive myself if something did happen there in relation to that. And again, I would say it's been 2 cases, and it's not the council that makes the ultimate decision as to whether the legislation has been met or whether an eviction should take place. It's the courts who decide that. But we do have to decide to put the case forward under kind of those circumstances, and that's why policy is a reason for it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Councillor
Councillor Holden's given 3 different case examples of inconsistency in terms of applying the streamlined eviction clause. As has been highlighted from our evidence, there's only been 2 streamlined eviction clauses since 2019. I think we would agree that we need to look at the streamlined eviction clauses. However, the risk for me is too great in deferring that process for 3 months. Who knows what could come up? And those 2 cases that have been referred to are both reported as antisocial behaviour, and as elected members we know how often they get these sort of issues as a notice of concern to us, and how the officers process those. For them to reach a streamlined eviction process suggests, to my mind, a degree of seriousness that we couldn't defer for 3 months. But it's clear that we do need to look at standardise, if we can, some guidance in terms of how we are applying streamlined eviction policies. But I can't support the motion as it stands at the moment in terms of the suspension of the process.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to debate? Motion? So, Councillor
I'm reluctant to come in just to reiterate what others have said, but I think, given this one, it's important to do that. For me, the risk is too great, effectively, what Councillor Forson and Auxiliary have just highlighted. I think that's what we've got to weigh up as councillors. And for this one, I'm similar to Councillor Forson as well. I'm not necessarily against some of what's been presented in the subject motion, but particularly with this area in 3 months presents too great a risk. It was articulated until the other councillor McTaggart as well. So for that reason, I can't support this particular motion. Thanks.
Anything else, Councillor?
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, I'm sitting in on this one because I can see exactly the reason for the motion being put up. And I'm taking on board what my colleagues at this side are saying about the risks, and I'm just asking myself the question, is there a shorter period which would be acceptable? Because statistically, the chances of an incident occurring in, let's say, 2 or 4 or 5, 6 weeks, is it a period that would be acceptable for those who are concerned about the risks?
I can address that, so.
Sorry, finish, Councillor Black.
Yes.
Now come back in, Convener.
2 seconds, Councillor.
I know where the people are coming from, with a list of something. Not just like one of the horrible one. However, what we're asking for here is the election for a 12-week period to allow the production of the humans if possible. Why don't we work in the background on the family election policy over the next 12 weeks? So we'll have the legal framework in place, we'll be working on our own strategy, and in the 12 weeks, we're still at the same point that we really be the past motion.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I think that's what Councillor Holmes' motion is asking us to do. Okay, any other contributions to the debate? Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Convener. Like my colleagues, the policy element isn't what I've got an issue with, only the 12 weeks. I've got an issue with 12 weeks because I don't know, none of us know, if there are cases that are sitting, because there's a year window for these evictions to take place. A year and a day means that they would fail. There could well be one sitting there that requires to go in front of the sheriff during that 12-week period. We missed that window because of that 12-week period, and that fails. We leave a community at risk. So it's just a scenario, but it's just the trick. I don't know why we can't continue to work on the policy in that 12 weeks. I don't know why we can't develop a policy without the suspension. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, anybody else has to take part in the debate? Councillor Hall.
I don't know if Dennis was getting at, like, could we shorten the periods? I would be against that currently, because I think, as we've just heard, you know, that the housing team are dealing with a different situation as well. So I would be against kind of squishing it in, because I think that you're taking things, resources away from an issue that they're having to deal with just now, and you'd be putting pressure on other people, and I don't think it would be something that should be rushed either. So I would be against, like, shortening the periods as well.
Any other contributions? Councillor Hall, opportunity to line.
Yeah, I'll thankfully, hopefully, I can provide reassurances to the members that I have no reason to oppose this. Because prior to developing the motion, I've indicated I had some quite in-depth discussions with Lee. And we had a discussion about this very issue, the timescale was in. So I had a much longer one, which effectively my one was open-ended. That we didn't carry any objections at all to a policy in place, procedures in place. I actually think that's a sensible approach, regardless of any potential pitfalls that people might see. But nevertheless, we arrived at a compromise. I think, thankfully, I think it's a helpful compromise. So just to confirm, the examples that's been given and the reasons for no support of the motion, I can address that point directly, I think. It was referred to as being 2 live cases. There has been 2 cases of a human eviction taking place, both of which, ironically, both of which constituents gave me. It just so happened there was 2, both of which I was directly aware of. And I knew about those, and that was, you know, those were proceeded and they went through the process. Now, what people will not know is that there's another live one at the moment, there's one more at the moment, which is why the motion was changed. And if you look at the motion, it says council agrees to suspend all future streamlined evictions for a period of 12 weeks. So the current ones that are current are not affected by this. They will still proceed to court, they will still go ahead, and there is no prospect at all of the case which is currently live, the only one which is live at the moment. There is no prospect of this motion changing the council's approach towards that. It will continue through the process. So hopefully that reassures you that there is no prospect of that happening. That's why it contained the word future. We had a specific discussion about the likelihood of this happening, which is why I included the word future in it. And that was the big thing I'm going to express my gratitude, because that was a point which raised my knee. And we talked it through and we agreed that the person so. The only one case that's currently live at the moment would be unaffected by this motion to council. Right? So hopefully that reassures you in that respect. Similarly, I've asked what other cases are on the go, and I had a discussion about this. I've discussed this issue directly with Lee. I've discussed this issue directly with the SNP group. I've discussed through the spokesperson. I've discussed this issue with the Clackmannanshire Tenants and Residents Federation. And basically everyone, because I really want to hear it, I've discussed it and explained about what happened, to give the maximum opportunity for these people to questions to get here. Right, so we've got an answer to that one. It's not relevant. The conservatism is unfounded because the motion is actually already taken out of account. What's really important, just for the other outstanding ones, is that I asked the question on Monday last. And it's up to the convener whether he wishes to allow the officer that I don't want to start testing the officers and concerns. I'll get my response in terms of similar. I raised the prospect about any future ones coming up. If there's none in the pipeline at the moment. Now, to suggest that whilst there's none in the pipeline at the moment, that waiting 12 weeks is going to have an impact on a case that we're going to consider or prosecute at the moment or even investigate at the moment, is fancy. So hopefully that will reassure members on two points. The current case is unaffected. There is no prospect of a future case in the foreseeable future. None of the officers were there at the time when I discussed it with them. Even if it were a 12-week period, a period of 12 months, still waiting a conviction, they're going to wait a hell of a long time before the conviction is going to be secured. In most many cases, it's not going to be attention already. Much longer than 12 months. This would have no material impact on that whatsoever. So I'm not trying to be smart about it, but they're outlined their objections. Hopefully they'll accept my work in terms of getting back to the description of how this motion would not impact in that way. They want it cleared, and I'll get additional issues about any future cases. Right? There are no cases in the pipeline at the moment. Other than one that's already active, and that will not continue. So I'm only using, I'm restricted to standing orders. I can only address issues here that I've raised in the debate. So I'm not going to rehash all ground, but I've answered the question directly. I've answered the objection directly to the group, and I hope now that the SNP group and the other members will be convinced of it. Because I'm not people lying, people try to put me what the facts. I did try to work before this. This is not something I just came up with in the last week. So hopefully that motion will be approved by the council. We need this. And can I just conclude by saying one thing? Mention was made to sex offenders. Ironically, a sex offender who's rehoused in the community has a right to stay in the home, has a right to a home like everybody else does. This legislation wouldn't impact on that person. Wouldn't impact on persons. Other legislation that covers sexual offenders. Right? Ironically, however, the sexual offender has protections that be excluded from this process because somebody that punches somebody in the face on Friday night, one man, and his wife and his kids are in the home, they don't know unaware of it, they don't have these protections. They would face that streamlined eviction. And if that's not I don't know anything else. So you didn't want to yourself about, more dealing with sex offender like that. They've got protections not afraid that ordinary people don't have. And just want to conclude with one fact. Really important thing about this is how this legislation is produced, which is covered slightly with regards to 12 tenants, it does not affect non-tenants in council. So you could have somebody that's working this private owner-occupier, they could commit all these things, they would not fall victim to this. Why? Because someone decided that this provision should only be available for social housing. If that's no prejudice to social housing tenants, I don't know what is. Equally, it's also muddying the waters in terms of antisocial behaviour and criminality. Further. We deal with antisocial behaviour, council deal with criminality.
Matters related to the debate.
Yes, well, that issue was raised, but it's an article, and I'm trying examples here that are not. Oh, it's not loose, that's not right. So, I hope we will get this motion through. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. This is threatening the it reinforces people's protections and rights until a point where we're ready to proceed. I'm not with my motion to try and stop showing elections. If I could, I would, because I think it's wrong. But I'm not, because we don't have the power to do that. What we do have the power to do is to make sure we take a responsible approach to when we do want to undertake an election. We have a policy in place that deals with legislative aspects of it. There's procedures in place which ensure that everybody is treated fairly and equitably. You can't have a situation where Mr. A gets elected on that stream of election, Mr. B with exactly the same best service slips through there. How do I explain that to communities? How do I explain that to people in my area when they say, how does that make sense? I can't justify it. That's why we need a policy. That's why we need procedures. And that's why we need to do the job.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Put that motion to vote. Clearly, there are different views expressed for and against the motions. So put it to the vote. Those in favour of the motion, can you please show? Those against? Okay, so the motion is lost, 12 votes to 4. Thank you. Item 18, again, motion from Councillor Holden.
Thanks, Convener. This motion against the officer will present a report to the next meeting of the Council providing timescales for the appointment of a policy officer and service planning participation officer, details of the policy and procedures where required to be reviewed by the Housing Service presented to the Council over the course of the next 2 years. Clackmannanshire Council, as has been discussed earlier, is not an antisocial behaviour strategy. The Council is required to produce an antisocial behaviour strategy in conjunction with partners, but it's not yet done so. The Council does not have an antisocial behaviour policy, and the production and approval of an antisocial behaviour policy has been hampered by the fact that we don't have a strategy to align it. So the absence of an antisocial behaviour policy takes scope for fairness and consistency in approach, which obviously undermines confidence in the organisation and the structure which oversees it. Now, these are the two key issues that were highlighted in the ARC, the non-compliance report was submitted, which actually got me involved in trying to determine where were the gaps in policies and how we should address those. But it's much wider than that, of course. It goes beyond just the two issues. But by providing elected members with details about when policy officer and service planning participation officer will be appointed, and what policies and procedures will be reviewed and presented to the Council for the next few years, we can be reassured that the Council will address any gaps which may exist. So the purpose of this is to bring a report, to bring an assurance to the Council when these appointments will take place, because we've already spoken about it today. Murray referred to it, and someone said, we're hopeful we'll have these appointments soon. Well, hopeful ain't coming for me. We need timescales. Money's been there for all the budget's been there, that's been sitting in the HR department, the housing department, and it's never seen the light of day. Elected members need to know when it will see the light of day, and I think it's important to get that information back. And it's equally important that will then allow us to have a review over what policy procedures are going to present to the Council over the next 12 months, next 24 months, sorry, so that we can take a view that those are priorities for the Council, and we can also bring attention to the officers any policies that we think have not been reviewed where they should be. So hopefully members will support the motion.
Thank you. Do you have a second for the motion?
No problem.
Councillor Bell?
No problem, sir.
For the second. Any wish to debate the motion? Oh, Councillor Forson.
Yeah, just on this one, I mean, I think there's already been said there that the tenant participation officer has been appointed. That appointment and that recruitment, sorry, that appointment and recruitment process wasn't without its challenges. And I think it's really difficult to give a set timescale for these things because the adverts could go out and no one can apply, and if we set a set timescale and no one applies, it's out of our control, and that's where I have slight issues with that. I also know that the place business plan reports going to be coming forward, which will detail overall for the service the policies and strategies that will be coming forward. And we need to take that on the whole, kind of about everything else that's been considered as well, and prioritise them, because I think as we've all kind of alluded to, we've all agreed, there are challenges when it comes to capacity, and we're going to have to put some things above others, and we're the ones who are going to have to take those decisions. So I personally like to do that in like the whole context for the service there. Again, it's not, I don't actually disagree with kind of the idea of these officers need to be appointed, and they need to be appointed ASAP. And I don't disagree that there needs to be a review and prioritisation of policies. It's just it needs to be done in a bigger context from my perspective.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to debate motion? Sorry, Councillor McTaggart.
Thanks, Convener. I've not got a problem with this either, except for the fact that I don't know how we can do it other than outside the process to the business plan, as Councillor Thorson has said. The two officers, I've spoken about it time and time again, and as far as I'm aware, it's still sitting with HR. And until it actually hits the advert stage, we're not going to see these officers. And even when it does go to the advert stage, we may control who's going to apply for it or not. So I just didn't understand how the motion's going to change the timescale to getting these two officers in place. Thanks, Denise.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Bain.
This one is actually, I don't have a problem with this one. 2 years is a long time, and if we can't get anybody in within 2 years, then we should be looking internally at the same time as looking externally. So I don't have an issue with this one at all. I think we do need a policy officer for the procedures. We're getting so many more procedures than we ever had before, and it's good to know, it would be good to know that there is somebody actually got their eyes on that fight all the time, so I'm quite happy with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, Councillor Clay?
Thank you. Just a small point. I accept that we can't foretell the future, but what we have control over is the advertisements for the position. And in fact, it might, maybe if the wording was changed, providing timescales for the advertisement for the appointment, would satisfy the
Can I just say to you, on the court of standing orders, I'm not going to accept that amendment to my motion.
So can I have that amendment formally submitted?
Yeah, for this, done things from the advertising, so advertising of this appointment. Paragraph.
Yes, I just need to keep formally reading the amendment that's for the chairman, the process.
So I the main thing I'm expecting, and I trust you. So, well, I'm proposing an amendment that we change.
Could you turn the mic on, please?
And I'm proposing the amendment that we change the wording in line 1 of the current motion to read: Council agrees that officers will present and report to the next organisation. But our next meeting, the council providing timescales for the advertisement for the appointment
policy that's set.
Okay, thanks for that. Is the removal of the motion happy to accept that? And then is the second happy to accept it?
Yeah.
Councillor, yeah. Okay, so we now, James, could you put your mic off now? So we now move on to debate the amendment. If anyone was to debate the amendment, Councillor Harrison.
So I totally understand why you want to put that in, but are we talking about just these 3 roles in particular, every role within the council? I just, you know, if you're putting an SLA on that kind of thing, why would it just be 3 roles? Why would it not be every role at the council?
Sorry, I'm sorry, just address the comments of the chair. And
sorry. Yeah, so I'm just wondering if, why would, if we're looking to put an SLA, a service level agreement in against the roles, why would it just be 3 roles? It seems like we're almost starting to rewrite HR policies in general when we start to do that.
Sorry, I just have a point out to you that on the amendment put forward was accepted by the original motion mover and second, or the second for the amendment. Can I have a second for the amendment? Second. Okay. Councillor Quinn.
Yeah, no, I'm just going over the amendment and the motion overall. And you know, I don't agree with your conclusion, Councillor Harrison. I don't think it's in any SLA on hiring anybody. It's not doing that. It's in an SLA on reviewing the policies, the procedures. And it's asking for us to be updated about when you know, the time scale for the advertisement of an appointment. That's all it looks like it's asked. To me, I don't see there's any, not saying any SLA or any appointments at all with this. I think it's very reasonable, and like it's been identified earlier, we had a good discussion about that during the previous agenda item. There is gaps here that need to be filled. I think this goes some way to filling that gap and to providing us with the assurance that the work's being done to hire people and to get that work done. So I'm quite happy to support the motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, considering the next council is the 30th of September, if this post hasn't been advertised by then, I would actually have something really strongly to say about that, to be fair. So I think on that basis, then I really can't see the need not to support the amendment in relation to getting these posts advertised. I mean, what the 30th of September next council meeting is, how many weeks away? No, 30th of November is how many weeks away? 9? 7?
So, last Chief Executive to come on.
I know it's a little unusual, just not to respond to what Councillor Paulson was saying. My understanding is these are 2 new roles that were part of the housing redesign. So those roles need to be evaluated as new roles. So you need to do the design of the role first and then go through the evaluation period. So it's not, you can't go straight to advert. So it does impact the timescales.
Councillor Taggart.
Thanks, Convener. These roles were created some time ago, so the evaluation process has been going on for some time. So I would hope that we're nearing the conclusion of this evaluation process, and we can hopefully have a conclusion to the entire process soon. So if there's a barrier to that, if somebody could let us know and see if that barrier can be resolved, that's Convener.
Any other contributions to the debate around the amendments being proposed? No. So then I put that amendment to the vote. Those in support of the amended motion, could you please show? Okay, so that motion will be carried unanimously. That amended motion will be carried unanimously. Motion Item 19, Councillor Hall.
We haven't amendment. And I thought that we were voting on the actual.
We're agreeing to amend, not to be given.
But we haven't completed the motion.
And I still have it.
Yeah, sorry, okay, so we'll vote to accept the amendment, now we're back to the original motion. Does anyone wish to debate the motion? Probably wish to debate the motion, Councillor Hall, for opportunity to start?
No, of course, there's still an opportunity. I don't understand this to debate the motion as amended. Nevertheless, it's one in the same, it's one in the same, so, just to say, I'm grateful for the sense that's been introduced to Councillor Coyne to get that in there, because really that's all I can. There's never any great or blue, it's all about making sure that something that hasn't happened, did happen. And that we didn't find ourselves in a situation saying, well, we're really unhappy because this post hasn't been filled. And we really ought to take our time from that, so we just definitively unhappy for some definite period. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. Initial opposition, it doesn't make sense. And so if that inclusion of that particular whether with the advertising element, because that's really, what I'm doing is putting a rocket in this and getting it moving. So that it comes back here. It's achieved that, I'm happy. That's it.
Okay, following that sum up, we'll do this bit again. Are we content to approve that motion as now amended? Thank you. So, item 19, Councillor Hall.
Thanks. As I said, my apologies again for the three separate motions. Well, my apologies. The reason I've got them in here is to explain it is because they're three separate issues. So I'm asking the Council of Police Officers to present a report to the next meeting Council outlining housing sector approach to evictions following confirmation of a 350% increase in council eviction between the period of 21-22 and 22-23. Now, the Council recently approved the Housing Operations Performance Update report, and that report provided a breakdown of the main reasons for homelessness in Clackmannanshire, but did not provide a breakdown of the Council's specific figures for evictions. A response from officers to questions raised by me at that meeting subsequently acknowledged the fact that 0 council evictions took place in 2021, but that this increased to 6 in 2021-22, with a further increase to 27 in 22-23. Now, as an elected member, I feel it's appropriate for us to be provided with a report which sets out the council approach to elections, in order to provide context and reassurance to elected members and provide the public regarding the number of elections which are recently taking place by the council. It's also vital that elected members provide assurances that we've got a robust policy framework in place which assures this council only ever undertakes elections where it is appropriate and proportionate to do so.
Thank you. Do we have a second of the motion? Councillor Quinn?
Yeah, I'm happy to second the motion. To me, any kind of, obviously, elections are not nice in any way to jump in that kind of magnitude that is warrant further investigation. So asking for a report, I think it's very reasonable, so that we can question the officers and we can get more context around it to make sure. Kind of going along with other things we spoke about today already, there's a policy that's being followed. Was it not being followed before? Has something changed? We just wanted to make sure there's a consistent approach and that there's some kind of reason, there's some kind of reason for that and it's being followed consistently. So I'm very happy to support the paper and please second it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone wish to debate the motion? Councillor Dawson?
Yeah, we're not going to vote against this motion, but just to put in context, in a Clackmannanshire context, it's easy to manipulate statistics, and 350% makes it sound like it's absolutely horrendous. But anybody who'd ask the officers for the figures would know that, in 2018-19 there were 36 evictions, 19-20 there were 19 because there was legislation put in place that prevented evictions for part of the year. 2021 there were no evictions again because there was legislation put in place because of the pandemic to prevent evictions going in there. And part of 21-22 when there were 7 evictions there was also legislation in part of the year. And then we go to 22-23 where there's no legislation, there's 27 evictions, and oh my goodness, we get the headline, there's 350% increase in evictions. I just think we have to be careful what we're saying there because that headline on the front of the newspaper is completely misleading. Well, there has been an increase, it's true, but it's for, I think it's absolutely clear the reasons for that. There was restrictions in place to prevent evictions for previous years. And again, I'll go back to the fact that the council can apply to the court for evictions and then essentially judges will decide whether the criteria is met for those. I think it's right and proper that the housing account and housing services and tenancies are managed quite clearly by officers, and operationally they have the go ahead to do that. Just have to be careful. We say time and time again, one or two can make the difference of 100 and 200% in Clackmannanshire. Like I say, I'm not going to go against it because I think the people that will come forward from officers will be pretty clear in explaining that. Just look forward to seeing that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tyler.
Thanks, convener. Again, I'm going to vote against this, but the kind of language kind of makes it sound like we're using evictions as a tool or willy-nilly, which I'm quite confident most of the time they for. So when the report comes back, I hope that was satisfied with it. That's the case. And if there are elements that we can do better, well, great, because nobody wants to do it before. But in the number of evictions, I mean, these are people. Let's not forget these are people. There are no evictions, there are no statistics. They're people. Nobody wants to put people out on the street. But during the eviction process, there's an average of 57 contacts made. That's an average, sometimes there's a lot more. An average of 57 contacts made by housing staff to try and prevent that eviction. So I didn't doubt that the eviction process is our last resort, but I welcome anything that will support that. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Rowland, an opportunity to supplement.
Yes, I do. First of all, can I just say that I absolutely refute the accusation which was cast across the council chamber, and no reference from yourself or anybody else that I've done something manipulated the statistics, because I haven't. I've not manipulated this. That's exactly what was said. That's exactly what was said across the council chamber.
That's several I took that comment. It wasn't aimed at you yourself and doing that message to others.
So the motion's up. The motion's up, and the motion talks on the statistics in the motion, and then someone talks about us we should never manipulate statistics. What statistics are referred to all in the motion?
I took that one to do the reference to the front page of the newspaper.
I'm going to come to that. Because that really is the major problem, isn't it? That's the major problem here.
Thanks, Convener. It's hard to sit here not feeling that the respect and the tone of the meeting is dropped. Feel free to come in if I'm off tangent here. But it seems to me over the last 2 or 3 items that the tone has completely dropped. We're not seeing the respect that I would expect from this chamber. And that comes from a comment getting made 2 motions ago around what we remembered. So I think I would urge Convener that we get back to a level of respect for our colleagues around the room, the opinions that we have, and understand that sometimes we win them, we win things, sometimes we lose arguments. We have to accept that. And the key thing the key aspect for me here is respect, and I'm not feeling that respect around the room. Thanks.
I agree actually, going beyond that, to something else. But I think the general tone of it is something we should all reflect on. It has dropped considerably in the last couple of 10-15 minutes to engage with each other. There's no need for that. There's processes in place to deal with this in a proper manner. Let's get back to doing it in that way. Councillor Rowland, can you sum up on the matters that we raised during that?
Yeah. So the matters that raised, well, first of all, was the point, as I was always intended to do, was about the manipulating the statistics, to make it quite clear. I haven't manipulated any statistics. I asked for information over a 3-year period, and that's what was given. I didn't ask for information for a 4-year or a 5-year period, not for any particular reason, but then they can believe that I look at it. That's the truth of the matter, that's what I got it. The problem here is what's been released in the press and the headline, because this party is obsessed with headlines, absolutely obsessed with headlines. Anything that does not emanate the Scottish National Party and Clackmannanshire Council seems a threat. I know that because I was in the Scottish National Party for a long period of time. I've raised motions here today, and if the tone of this meeting has dropped, it's because there hasn't been a sensible argument put forward yet, in opposition to the motions has not been addressed. That's where the tone of the meeting dropped, and I've said I remember, and I will remember, and I've already remembered, and I hope you did remember. Final point is about the fact that the acknowledgement was made to the council that although we're manipulating statistics, apparently they're truthful. I know that things are difficult post-truth politics, but this must be the first time anybody's ever been criticised for telling the truth. Because all I've referred to simply is the statistics as they've been provided to me by the officers and said that that is worked out of a report. The only person that's made sense on the opposite side has been Councillor McTaggart, and she said, because the truth will come out in the report.
Because
That's
of
right.
course we get back into the territory that starts to stay away from.
But it's not
Nobody has, we have personal criticism of you at all. That's not that it's taken, it wasn't, it never been. That's not what we responded to. So I want to respond to some standard comments that are related to the motion and nothing else.
I'm responding because I'm citing the fact that Councillor
I'm
McTaggart.
going to ask you to sum up the recent points that were raised.
I'll continue to sum up based on the points that were raised. The point that was raised was by Councillor McTaggart. I'm saying it's the only sensible one I've heard. Which I'm entitled to my opinion on that. You may not agree with it, I'm entitled to it on something.
But you're not allowing people the same opinion themselves and taking offence at it, so you can't have it both ways.
Oh, they can take offence at it.
You don't get to send those messages across the chamber and take offence when you think you're not directly.
What I've done to me, what I've done.
I want you to respond only to the points.
That's exactly what I've done. That's exactly what I'm doing. That's exactly what I'm doing. I've made a direct quote back as to what's it believed that the council used, and I've responded to that. I've responded back to the points being directly with Councillor Lindsay. I've responded to that, not in debate, but in the point after debate, sorry, in the motion to move forward. And I'm now responding, summing up, to the points being raised by Councillor McTaggart. The truth won't come out in the report, which well, that's all I wanted. The report's not going to talk about a 350% increase, it's going to talk about the reasons for a 350% increase, which is the truth, and that's all I wanted, that's all I've asked for. So perhaps if we can, if the members opposite, if they could worry less about headlines in the newspaper and worry more about accountability and scrutiny in the council, we'll be a lot more forward. I'm happy to close on that.
Those in favour of the motion, please show.
I'm asking if we were voting because I can't hear again.
Just say yes.
Yes, we're voting.
We're voting on the third motion, which we need to have in front of you in favour.
Councillor Biddy, what's your vote? Yes or no?
I should say yes. I should have said that Kenny said that.
Okay, anybody against the motion? I'm going to take that as unanimous. Everybody's voted on our motion, it's carried unanimously. Thank you to everybody for the long day, for everybody. Thanks for the contribution of council officers.